Hey everybody, my name is Tim. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another Rainbowsphere Revamped devlog. And this is going to be sort of the first one we're actually going to be diving into Unreal Engine. I'm going to start explaining some technical stuff. It's going to be a long one. I don't know exactly what's going to be covered in here, but it's going to roughly be a sort of about the controls, player controls. I'm going to show you the old prototype that I built before. I built a prototype that I've already shown you, because actually I started with an older prototype early on and then I scrapped that and I started all over again. I'm going to explain why in a little bit once we start getting into the prototype. There's a lot of other stuff that I also need to discuss, because I got stuff for hours and hours and hours. So I need to sort of split it up. So for this one, I think I'm mostly going to show the old prototype and going to talk about sort of why I rebuilt it and sort of about sort of the player controls for the new game. Which if you played it, you can still, in the previous devlog, there's in the comments, and I'll probably also, I'll put it in the comments here as well. You can download a sort of a playtest. There's a public playtest that everybody can play to try out sort of the gameplay mechanics and play it with a controller. I saw a lot of people try to play with a keyboard. You can play with a keyboard, it's just not a good experience. I have keyboard support for now. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it, because it's just going to be a better experience with controller, or I'm going to put like a warning when you open a game, like play this with a controller, play this with a controller. Anyway, put in a controller. I noticed there was another thing that came out of the beta test. Everything with X input controllers works, so everything sort of Xbox controller works. Generic controllers don't work as of right now, or you need to download a piece of software that sort of remaps just a general input to X input. So if you have something there's tools for that. That's also how you use, for example, PlayStation 5 controller with any regular Steam game, for example. Anyway, I'm gonna try to see if I can make something easier for that down the line, but it's actually not as easy as it sounds to start supporting all controllers. I noticed once I started diving into that. So for now, anything Xbox controller will work. Anyway, let's start diving into the actual devlog. So let me give you a quick demonstration of sort of the first prototype that I've built. And I already know a lot of people here are going to say, oh my god, this looks a lot better. And I know the graphics here are better, but that's something I noticed. Some people were asking about the graphics in the prototype. Those are placeholder graphics. The one that you played, that's all placeholder graphics. Like, I thought it was pretty clear with it just being boxes with a checker UV pattern grid. But I guess that wasn't. None of that is going to be in the final game, guys. It will all actually be assets, like good looking assets, like floating rocks or pieces of wood that you roll on or stuff like that. You will see in this prototype, because the previous prototype, the one that I'm going to show you here, so you can see here in the editor, you can see the space one. That's the environment that you familiar with from the previous demo. In this one I only had it with the main menu, because menus are notoriously difficult to do in Unreal, and I'm gonna get into that in a later video. So here I just mainly had the menu. Let me see if it sometimes right. I mainly had a menu like that. So here the menu was just game mode select by just playing. So you can see it's still a sphere is rolling on the bar. You can go to story mode. And new game will continue. So if I put new game, so you can see here there's actually more assets going on. So my idea also for this game, but also so for the previous one, and what I might do a little bit different from this one. So there are going to be sort of themed environments like this one. This is for the forest theme environment with trees around and stuff like that, nice looking lighting. So that's going to be a general concept for Rainbowsphere. Also with the new one, I'm going to sort of have themed environments and then levels that are going to be based around that. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it as detailed as you see here, because here I try to make it look like everything is really built on the trees. Maybe I'll do that, maybe I don't, but anyway, this is the previous prototype. So it's, I mean, let me just play through it a little bit. It's very buggy, so you can play through it. There's some sound effects there. I had a high score list. This is disabled right now, but this was working before, so it would update based on your score, and you would actually be logged into your Epic Game account, and you would actually submit scores, which worked. So here, there's a little menu. So here again, you cannot tell from me playing this, but the the gameplay here feels really floaty. That's one of the reasons why I sort of started over again. This uses sort of the default character template, which I'm gonna get into in a little bit. Let me just play through a couple of levels so you can kind of see what I did here. So you see all sort of the same mechanics are here. You couldn't roll forward and backward yet. It was more completely 2D. Yeah, here you are. All right, here's the environment is gone. I guess I removed it from some of the levels. But the thing is, just all the graphic stuff just complicates everything early on. And I didn't want to do that with the new prototype. So that's why with the, it's so floaty. So with the new prototype, what I mainly had, what my idea was that I would focus on the gameplay first, and then I would do the graphics later. Oh no. All right, I died. So let's do a couple of levels. So you can see I actually got, oh my god, I suck. Yeah, the controls don't. When I was playing this initially, I kind of liked it, but it's very floaty. It doesn't feel nice, to me at least. Let me just show some other levels here. So I did a bunch of levels. So here's this one we saw. So I had 9 levels. So here's one where you sort of fall down. You need to sort of bounce to the walls and then bounce up. And then there's one here. Oh yeah, I think this one might need to download an asset. So I'll be right back. Because all right, there we go. So it's still downloading. So you know what one we would sort of go over these things. Just show you. So this is right. So you would essentially just hop over these wooden panels, and then you would sort of bounce over here and then go to the finish. And then there was also one over here on the end. So here's another one. So anyway, the reason why you might think, all right, the graphics here look good, but like technically from just the way that it's built, this is far inferior from what I have right now. And realistically, the graphics like this, like I can build a level like looking like this in 30 minutes in a new game with all of the setup that I have. So in terms of graphic design, that's not too hard. I really wanted to focus with the new one on sort of making it technically sound, which is the approach that I took now, because the graphics are just going to complicate things, and I first wanted to sort of get the gameplay out of the way. Let me just explain some of the things why I sort of got rid of all of these things. So let me find my player controller. Or maybe it's good to sort of let me open up a new a real project. But I don't know if you're a developer or not, so it kind of depends on if this is actually going to be relevant. But I'm going to just show you a basic sort of template project. So you can kind of understand what I did differently with the new one. So let me just launch engine and let's make a new project just for the sake of this video. So here you have some options for stuff. So let me just do third person. You can choose Blueprint or C++. Let's do Blueprint. I made my my project in Blueprints. I haven't really done much C++ yet for this, so let's do just demo project, I guess. Let's press create. All right, so we're here, and the cat is over there. I don't know what's up with the cat. She's been a little weird the last couple of days. Last week she was really cuddly, and now this week she's constantly being meowing and stuff. She doesn't know what you want. Kitty? Yeah. Anyway, so this is sort of template project, and you can walk around, you can jump, so like that. So this, it has sort of a so there's a you have sort of this template character here, and there's a character movement thing here. Maybe I should increase my UI size. I'm not sure how well this holds up, so let me just maybe increase my UI size for Windows so you can actually maybe see this a little bit. All right, so this should hopefully be a little bit easier to see. So you have a bunch of stuff here, and here you have this sort of character movement, and this is sort of a template that Unreal has, which you can change a bunch of stuff. For example, I can let me see, walk speed. Like I can, if I put this 1200, I compile, and now I press play here, you can see I will run a lot faster, and this is just very easy to sort of manipulate. Like if I say left shift, and then I can say, for example, grab character movement and then say set max walk speed and to 1200, and then on the release, for example, I would put it to 800. And then if I were to play, then all right, need to give it a target actually. So if I hold shift, you can see I can sprint. So this has like a lot of stuff built in here, which is quite easy to work with. And essentially that's kind of how I started with my the cat wants to play. Kitty, come over here. Yeah, come over here. So essentially that's also how I sort of if you hear the cat meowing, sorry for that. But essentially that's how I sort of started with the character. So you can make a blueprint class here. You can make a character and then call it BP my player, for example. And then essentially this sort of gives you sort of a template thing. So if I go my world settings and let's make I need to open some game mode. Let's do pawn class. Let's do this one, BP my player. So you can see this will just sort of spawn in the player. It's not doing anything yet because of course we haven't hooked up any controls yet. But you can see you have sort of these movements here. So we can copy some of this movement input, can put them out. So if let's copy and paste that, for example, on my player. Let's open up the full blueprint editor. Let's nest it in here. Let's just paste it in here. Compile. Right. So now you can see we can actually move around, and then we could grab the jump here. So you can see this all of sort of. So this all works from this character movement component that you have. So you can see now we can jump. Now right now this is a first person thing, of course, but I can add a camera here. I can add a camera. And let's rotate it 90 degrees. Oh no, I think I put it in the wrong spot. I think it probably needs to be over there. Maybe. So you can see now I can move around, and let's add a sphere, or let's add where is it? Let's add sphere, right? And let's have the collision actually fit it. Let's do 55. Okay, Kitty, you're washing yourself. All right. So you can do like that, and then you're now essentially we have a sphere thing, and we can move around. We can jump. So it essentially has all of these sort of the default mechanics in there, and that's essentially what I used sort of in the first prototype, which is all well and good and probably fine as a starting point, but it didn't give me the feeling that I wanted for my character. Because if you played the new one, it feels a lot more dynamic. So it's essentially just like, it feels like a rolling ball and a bouncing ball. And that's kind of what I wanted. So for the new one, I had a very different approach. I actually, what I started doing is I have a sort of a dynamic based approach. So actually you apply forces by moving the stick or pressing jump. So you're actually applying forces to the ball, and then I have sort of drag force applying back to it, or decreasing the drag force if you hold B, stuff like that. So I'm trying to sort of get the feeling of a controlling character. So I don't want it to feel completely like a rolling ball, like a Super Monkey Ball. I do want it to feel like you're controlling a character, but to an extent. So I try to sort of get a nice hybrid there. And that was kind of only possible by sort of coding this myself from scratch. So let's maybe open up the actual new game. And then we might jump back and forth a little bit between the old game and the new game, but then you can kind of see what I'm doing there. All right, so here in the new game, this is not from the prototype. This is already has some other stuff already. Start game, play game. All right. Let's just yeah, let's go into the, let's just maybe go into the level from the prototyping level, demo level. All right. So here's the demo level that you know from the prototype. And I'm going to be discussing a lot of the stuff in here, because essentially what this was for, what you might have noticed, is just to, and like I thought it was pretty clear these were placeholder visuals, but essentially what I've been doing here is I've been building sort of a tool set that allows me to sort of quickly make these levels. For example, let me just, so here you can see, here's my blueprint. Blueprints are essentially, so in Unreal you can sort of code either with C++ or with blueprints. Blueprints are kind of like VOPs in Houdini, but then for Unreal. Essentially here I have, these are sort of all of the tools that I have. So I made a thing that's essentially a building. I made building blocks to be able to build my game. I'm still working on that. I'm working on some stuff for sort of building level or graphics, but essentially, so for example, here I can go into this block and I can say, for example, all right, I want it to be green or I want it to be red. Do I want to destroy the block? If you hop on it, I can say, right, destroy block. I don't want to say how long should it last before it gets destroyed. Stuff like that. I can disable the wall jump if I want. Ignore hide is a thing. I will show you that. I can show you that in another level. But essentially just all building tools here. So here's, for example, a thing that triggers a prompt. So this will trigger a pop-up with this text here. Here's another thing with a, for example, a curve here. So here I have a movable block here. Essentially, with this takes an animation curve. So essentially, this thing here, this curve, I go in here, I can edit this curve, and then essentially this thing will just move along the curve, and I have options there to sort of to control that. And if I take the move block, you can see how long should it last to move around the curve. Should it be triggered or should it move from the start? Trigger ID are essentially matching these IDs. So I essentially started building these tools here. We'll get into that in another video because there's just a ton of stuff that I want to cover. But let's continue this thought on these gameplay mechanics that I was talking about. But this is a good level to start demoing it here. So essentially this is, yeah, I mean you've seen this. You can roll around, you can jump around. Again, if you haven't played it, link in the description. You can try this demo level yourself. You can change color, jump further. Here we have the under control stuff. So, and I died. Bunch of stuff going on. So let's dive into that blueprint over here. So here I don't have the mechanic. As you can see, it's all just coded from essentially just if you make a blueprint, as you can see, you have different options here, and essentially there's what you can choose here so an actor is an object that can be placed and spawned in the world. For example, all my blocks and stuff are actors. And you have a pawn. A pawn is an actor that can be possessed. So it's essentially a child of an actor. So it's an actor, but it's on top of that, it has extra logic built into it that allows you to control it essentially. But it doesn't have the sort of the character movement component that you saw before. And the character that has the movement component in there. So essentially, if you're going to be, so if I click on this, you can see here, my parent class is a pawn. So that is essentially this thing over here. So it's one level below this. So that's how you work in Unreal anyway. You can essentially, you can sort of make stuff from other stuff. So you can sort of, and that's called object-oriented programming. So essentially you can sort of grab a, you can have a parent class and you can make a child from that, and it will sort of inherit the logic. For example, these boxes here, they are a static block, but they're a child of my block base. And you can see here, parent class is block base. So you can see here, parent class, block base. And block base is the one that I have in here. So let's go back over here. level there. So, and that's kind of the same with these controllers. So my player controller here is right now. Let's close up place. There's a ton of stuff. It's actually a lot more complex than you might think based on how simple the game is. But essentially, this is just a pawn, and here is a here's the sphere. Press A to start. That's the thing. I didn't have that in an earlier test, but people were confused about like why is my character not starting? So there's just a A to start thing right now and that's actually in the character itself. So here we just have the sphere. Again, this placeholder. We're gonna do graphics for that later. Yeah, we'll see how that ends up. So here you have, and not everything is organized. You can see there's actually there's a lot of sort of variables and stuff going on here. Essentially, I coded this from scratch. So there's a couple of event graphs here. I'm just gonna assume not everybody here knows Unreal Engine. So I'm just gonna go over some stuff here, that some Unreal Engine stuff on how it generally works. So it's kind of like VOPs in Houdini, which you might be familiar with if you watch my channel, because it's normally more of a Houdini focused channel. Essentially, you just have a sort of order of operations. So for example, when you start gameplay, it begins with an event begin play, and then sort of walks through just through some of the stuff. It's just setting some variables here. For example, here I'm just setting a wall jump timer. Essentially, that's when you wall jump. This was something I changed actually after the prototype, because first it wasn't resetting. So you could, if you would fall, you could still wall jump in the air. So now this is driven by a timer. So after 0.25 seconds, you can no longer wall jump. So, because if you're gonna wall jump, of course, you don't want to be super precise exactly when you hit the wall. You want a little bit of a grace period. So anyway, so essentially, I was getting losing track there of what I was talking about. Anyway, so you have different events that can be triggered. So event play will just begin on when the event starts. So you're just setting a bunch of parameters here. Creating the base UI. That's going to be important in a later video where I'm going to talk about the user interface. So I'm using common UI. Essentially, just have a base UI that's always existing. You push stuff into there, which is going to be interesting once we start talking about it. The HUD is always going to be there. So that has the timer. Setting some of the dampening. Like I mentioned, it's a physics-based sort of controls, and then this sort of says the dampening, like how fast do you fall, how fast can you move, and dampening is being influenced by holding B, for example, on the controller, stuff like that. But let's go to the input. So here's essentially, here in the input is where I've coded most of my control stuff, and it might look complicated, and there's actually a little stuff going. I should maybe organize it a little bit more. You can collapse certain stuff into functions, which I have done in some places, and I haven't done in some other places. Let's go to movement first. So let's check horizontal movement. So input axis right. So essentially in Unreal Engine, you sort of map stuff to controller. So here you can see I have my controller bindings essentially. So if you have an input called move right, which is move right, and then if you have move left, it's essentially move right but inverted. So you don't need to move left, you just need move right and move up. And you just invert it if it's the other way around. So essentially what I'm just doing here with move right is you can see there's a branch here. Depending on if the wall jump is enabled, because if we're going to be wall jumping, the sort of the move right is going to do something a little bit different, of course. But if we're going to just talk about the controls, you can see here I have something called a function. It's essentially a bunch of these nodes compiled, sort of pop together in a function, which you can reuse in other places. You can go in there. And you can see movement speed and drag are being sort of used here to add a force. So essentially my thing here is a dynamic object. You can see it's a physics actor. So essentially it's influenced by physics. So if I move my control stick, essentially I'm adding force on on the object, and that's gonna allow it to sort of roll around. And then I have some of these variables here that are sort of influencing the controls a little bit. All right, I kind of messed up the interface here, but we're mostly back to get to where we were. All right, let's check input. Where were we? All right, so essentially just adding sort of controls. I guess we can remove that thing. There's probably some leftover crap here from what I did before. So essentially I would just add sort of horizontal movement. You see if wall jump is enabled, then we're gonna have some settings here to sort of set up the wall jump, which is essentially setting more of a boost direction. So you just have also like the boosters and the wall jump, essentially all that kind of stuff, essentially just sets a boost direction. And you just have I think it's in here. You have a boost player here, which essentially just boosts the player in the direction of the boost direction. All right, so let's go through some of this stuff here again. So the jump thing here is a little bit. So there's a lot of stuff here going on with the jump. If we just go to the sort of general jump thing, so there's some checks here, because of course sometimes when you press A, it's gonna unpause the game. It's not always gonna jump. So there's just some checks here to check if the game is paused, if it's disabled, are you using a keyboard or are you using a controller. Turning on physics simulation when you, for example, when the game is being on pause, stuff like that. But in general here you have the jump force. And again, doing some stuff to trigger, for example, if wall jump is true, to boost the player. So it's going to essentially just be the wall jump mechanic there. So there's some stuff here that I might actually change because I've been revising the control scheme quite a lot. So essentially what I'm doing here is essentially once you jump, essentially gravity is disabled for a little bit. As you see, enable gravity. I might actually change this and just do it with forces. It's because originally when I started sort of adding these forces, and this is going to be an interesting thing because that's something I changed, and I'm actually now thinking about that I should maybe get rid of this disable gravity thing, regardless of that. So when I'm jumping, actually what I'm doing is I'm adding a force. So when you sort of jump, you sort of add a bit of add an impulse to the to the player. There's two ways to sort of add forces to dynamic object. You can add a force, you can add an impulse. And so you have add force and you have add impulse. Essentially add impulse just does it once. Does it on one substep, so one frame or one substep of a frame. It adds a force. For it adds an impulse to the character to sort of launch it or do whatever. Add force will sort of just add force constantly. What I noticed when I was doing the jumping is that if I do jumping with add force, depending on the frame rate, you are gonna jump higher or lower. That was something that took me quite a while to figure out, which was very annoying. I can maybe demonstrate it. You can kind of see what's going on. By the way, if this seems a little bit sort of all over the place, it's because there's just too much stuff to come in here, and I thought I wanted to be technical, so I'd rather just talk you through the project instead of cutting this up into a nicely templated 10-minute video. I think this might be interesting, but let me know if you actually think this is more interesting or you'd rather have sort of shorter cut down stuff. So, but anyway, if you're gonna do add force, and I'm gonna demonstrate this. So this thing here is triggering by the jump. I can show you if I do print string. So print string will print the string to terminal. So if I were to jump now, just make this a little bit bigger. Jump. You can see it there on the corner. You see that's being triggered. All right. So know that is doing the jumping. So maybe instead of doing it with impulse, let's do it with a force. So let's all right, let's hook up some of this stuff. Let's split structure there, and let's do this one in the X And then this one in the Y, so similar to how we have it in the other one. Full acceleration change. And we probably need to multiply these forces quite a bit. Let's do a multiply in between them, else it's probably not going to work. Multiply, right. And multiply on the other one. All right. Probably need to multiply it by quite a lot. Let's try 500. All right, and let's hook that up instead. All right, so let's see what it's gonna do. All right, 500 was too much. All right, let's try 1 first. All right, so that's not enough. So I was right that I needed to multiply it a little bit, but all right. Right, so you can see now we have somewhat of a similar thing that we had before. But right now our frame rate is, maybe a little bit higher. Let's do 60. Now I think we're probably left with something very similar to what we had before. So we could play our game like this, and it will feel pretty similar. You can see I pretty much have the same controls. And this was something that when I was developing this was very confusing. So you can see I have this my jump, but let me limit the frame rate for now, and you're gonna see the problem. Let's say t.max FPS equals 20. All right, there you go. So the problem with this thing is that it's dependent on the frame rate. So if I put it back to, let's actually put it back to t.max FPS equals, right. So you can see at 120 max, it's behaving normally, but if let's put it to 10, you can see I really get launched. That's sort of the problem with the sort of dynamics based stuff. So you need to do, it makes a lot of stuff a lot more complicated, but it does sort of give you a nice control. It has both upsides and downsides. It's probably easier with just the general control scheme that I've shown you before, but I kind of like the dynamic based controls. But that's something that I run on along the way, and I thought I wanted to throw that in there because I think that might be something that people who are maybe trying dynamic based. Oh wait, I should put the frame rate back to because that's also working in the editor. Because that took me quite a while to figure out. Right, so put it back to there it is right now, and then if we put this back to add impulse over there, then this essentially behaves the same. Put it to 10, essentially behaves the same no matter what the frame rate is. So it's because this is only happening sort of on one substep. This is happening on multiple. So if you have essentially the increment is going to be bigger if you have a lower if you're having a lower frame rate. So that was something that I felt was quite interesting. So that's some problems that I ran into. Aside from that, just the overall control scheme. So it's all based around just manipulating forces. And like I mentioned, sort of the enable and disable gravity is essentially done to enable the sort of the hold jump. Because normally on the regular character, you would have something like that. I think, yeah, that's essentially why I started disabling the gravity. Right, so I mentioned before that I forgot, but so, because the problem is I cannot keep adding force over time, because that's going to be dependent on the frame rate. What I can do is I can turn off the gravity and then turning it back on when I release. So if I'm holding this, gravity will essentially be disabled, so you will sort of float upward. If I let go, then gravity is enabled. So that's how I'm doing that. So skip what I said before about getting rid of that. I just forgot about that. Like I mentioned, there's a ton of stuff going on here that I'm remembering while walking through this. So talking about stuff, of course, we don't want to be able to jump while in midair, because by default, like this would just allow you to jump. So we need a check to see if we're actually on the ground. Then normally with the default character thing, you have something that checks if you're on the ground. Well, you don't have that over here. So I guess there's multiple ways to do that. I'm not sure if my way is the best way to do that. I think I'm doing that over here. Let me just need to check if I'm doing it in here in the block base or if I'm doing it in the block static. I think I'm doing it in block static. See, there's a bunch of stuff going on here. Okay, so I'm actually not doing it in any of these places. I'm actually doing it in the player base here. So you can see here is a component hit base. So this will check if essentially if my sphere hits another actor. Here I'm writing out the actor. So which actor is hit. Then I'm gonna do over here hit block hit base block. So this is going to be the hit event when you hit the sort of the base block. And again, the base blocks are essentially just the parent class. So everything that's a block that you can land on is going to be a base block. Then we're going to jump into function jumping parameters. This is going to check the impact normal. Well, wait, let's get into that later. So essentially, what it's going to do from the hit actor, if it's block base. Then we're gonna grab from that, and I think that's block base. So we need, it's gonna be this one. So this has a variable called, what was it? Set jump. It's enabled. So it's gonna grab it, and it's gonna write it out as enable jump. So if I hit something, it's gonna enable a jump, essentially. And what's happening over here with the impact normal? So that's happening over here in the event graph. So I'm writing out impact normal. It's going to check on the object that I'm hitting what the impact normal is. So the impact normal is of course going to be so in here the normal are going to face this direction, are going to face this direction, this direction, this direction. So depending on the angle, I'm either going to enable or disable wall jump. Let me show you why that was added. Let me remove it real quick. And I think at least that this was the part where I'm talking about what it was for, but it gets complicated. Right, so let's say you have a play here. So I think, all right, that was not the part that I was. So, right, that was not the part I was talking about. But there is one over here. So, right. So what this is doing here, I already know what this is. So this is essentially checking if the X normal. So that's going to be normal on the horizontal axis. If that is above a certain threshold, then you're going to enable wall jump, and then you're actually able to wall jump if you hit it. There was another thing, then I need to check which was something I wanted to, which I thought this was for, but it's actually something else that I did somewhere. Because the problem is, if you're gonna hit the bottom part of something, of course you don't want to enable jumping. So I'm trying to find where I did that. All right, I found it, hidden somewhere. I guess this is where C++ might be more organized. If you have it just nicely laid out in C++ documents, probably easy to find stuff. All right, but it's in the jump force. Check which side of the player gets hit. Disable jump if it hits the top. So over here, I'm grabbing the hit location. So where am I sort of hitting it? I'm getting the actor location. And then essentially I'm subtracting the two. And then if the Z vector is below 0, so essentially that's going to draw a vector in direction. If that's below 0, well, essentially I'm grabbing the Z component. So just because the Z component is the up direction. If that's below 0, then essentially I'm going to be enabling that thing. Let me show you what happens if I don't have that. Let's disable. Let's get rid of that. Right. Compile. So let's add another block here. Right. So now I think, right. Yeah, you can see it sort of launches me from the bottom here, from the, you know what, maybe, because actually what I did before is maybe I want to reintroduce this. Now I'm thinking about it. So why I had that before is that when my jump was still behaving differently, I had it because you could sort of stick to the bottom of stuff, which was annoying. But now that I'm thinking about it, might actually be nice to have a mechanic where you can sort of bounce from the bottom of stuff. Might actually be cool. I had that in my original Flash game as well. You know, actually like recording this type of stuff is helpful. Let me reintroduce it real quick. Was it false? Right, like that, right? So, I broke it. How did I break it? True? Right, there we go. So I might actually reintroduce that, but I guess that's what's gonna happen when you do these devlogs. That's also what I find interesting also of doing tutorials. Always when I do like tutorials for other stuff, I always come up with new ideas when I'm explaining stuff, which I find is so that's another thing that I did in here. So you can see there's a bunch of stuff here, and we'll get back to some of this stuff in a later video as well. As you can see, there's so much stuff going on here. So essentially this is how the sort of the jump and the boost stuff works. So essentially there's some checks to check if it's a wall jump or not. If it is, we're gonna write out the boost factor. The boost factor is going to be manipulated by the controller. Like I mentioned, that's how the wall jump works. Because the wall jump is actually angle based with the control. That's kind of why I thought of maybe disabling the keyboard controls, because I don't want people to play this with a keyboard. Toggle. Essentially, that's the move up. So that's this stuff. Let me just make an extra box here so you can demo it. Oh no, I don't want it like that. Let's go. So that's this control. You can sort of move forward and backward. I didn't have that in the previous prototype, but the idea with this is because that's kind of why I call it sort of a mix between Super Meat Boy and Super Monkey Ball. Because these types of things, like you've probably played one of those games before, where you're like a ball and you roll around. The problem with that type of stuff is it's really about sort of balancing the ball. I don't want that to be this type of game all the time. Like I want it to be sort of a speedrun friendly sort of game where you bounce around these levels, avoiding stuff, which you don't have if you're gonna constantly have these 360 controls. So that's why I opted with a system where you can sort of enable and disable this. Probably in the final game, there might be places where this is disabled, and I'll probably do like an on-screen UI thing where it shows you if the 360 controls are enabled or disabled, because I already ran into some situations where you maybe don't want this have enabled at all times. But essentially, if you just hold this enables sort of just control. So essentially here, set constraint mode to 6 degrees of freedom. So essentially that will sort of tell the game that, all right, you can move every direction. If I release it, it constrains it to the XZ plane, which essentially just means that you cannot be pushed off even by physics. So, because that was something that was quite important to me, because I wanted, if you're in this mode, I don't want you to be pushed off just by regular physics alone. Maybe I might have some occasions where I might sort of have stuff moving back and forth and where I want a specific object to be able to push you off. But in general, I don't want when you're just playing around where you're like, if you're gonna be accidentally on just like on exactly the edge. Let me maybe show it. Right, so you can see here right now I'm really on the edge, and I won't fall off. I can play like that, and I won't fall off. Because that's kind of something that I just wanted to have. So you're sort of, when the 2D gameplay is actually feels like 2D gameplay, and the 3D gameplay is legit 3D controlled gameplay. So that's kind of what's happening here. Reverse camera is just doing the camera movement. So it's just triggering a timeline to move the camera controls. I kind of did that because if I remove this, right, let's just disable this right now. Because if I don't do that and I just have it like this, you can see it's a little bit confusing as to where you're moving. You kind of want be a bit more up when you're having 3D controls. And if you're having 2D controls, you want to be more on the side, because then you kind of want the side overview. So that's kind of why this is there. So you just, the camera moves up, so it gives you a sort of more top-down overview, so you can actually do the 3D sections a little bit easier. So that's kind of why that was added. So let's go back in here. So that's essentially what's happening here. So essentially, when I toggle that, it doesn't happen if the game is paused. That's a check there. Oh, and what's happening here? So linear dampening. So essentially, I am really dampening your speed when you let go. Because if I get rid of this, I'm not sure if this is still gonna happen, because it might be another redundant thing that I did that got fixed later. But if I don't do that, I think the game is gonna crash if I try this. All right, so let's move really fast and then let's go. All right, it doesn't happen here. All right, but I had some cases where if I, for example, hit a colored block while I do that. Let me try to see if I can actually show that. Let's make it red. Right, let's see if I can actually if we can actually show why I did it like that. Right. So I think now the game will break if I, let's see if I can actually get it to break. All right now it doesn't. All right, there we go. Yeah, so it crashed. All right, so we're back. And let's go back to where we were. So that's why that thing is there. Because that was just annoying. So there's a bunch of this stuff that you run into when you're doing this. And it's essentially why that happens is because if your speed is too high and you try to lock the axis, then, well, essentially, the engine doesn't like it and it just breaks. So that's why I'm sort of applying a ton of drag here, then waiting for 0.1 of a second, and then I'm setting the dampening, sort of drag speed to the normal amount, and then I'm locking it. And so far, this hasn't broken yet. So I think that's good right now. So you can see there's a bunch of stuff here. Oh, if you hold run, angular dampening to a certain value. I should probably promote this to a parameter. And then angular dampening. And then if you release the key, it says angular dampening. So that's essentially if you run, it will reduce angular dampening to a very low value. Let's say I put this really high, then you can see what happened is gonna. Oh, let me skip tutorial. So if I were to hold B now, right, that's the rotational drag. So now I'm just dragging around. I'm wondering why the movement drag is not being influenced. Maybe actually there's something here that I overlooked, which should also be applied. So actually, maybe I should look into this. I will write this down. Yeah, some other things here. If the player is squeezed between objects, kill the player. You can see there's just a ton of stuff that you need to stuff. Spawn UI elements, pause, unpause. But you can see in general. Reset levels, just if I press 9, is just for playtesting purposes. So here 9, if I press that, it will reset the level. This plus mostly just for playtesting purposes. So it's easy for me to reset the level. Although I also have an option for it in the menu. Yeah, I think for the most part, like you see, we discussed, oh yeah, this arrow thing. Oh, that's what I was exploring before. A friend of mine, when I was trying to make the wall jump work, it was like, or maybe you should do an arrow that, like, in facing a direction, you can sort of see where where you're bouncing. I didn't end up using that anymore. Let's see if it still works. That might be fun. Is it visible? Set visibility. Let's see. Visibility. Not sure if I don't think that's working. I could probably get rid of the. Could probably get rid of the arrow. Is that the one? Yeah, that's the one. Probably get rid of it, and it'll probably be fine for the most part, except for part over here, which we can just get rid of because I'm not gonna do the arrow anyway. So there you go. Removed the arrow. Beautiful. Yeah, that's for. Oh yeah, and here's one check. If you're playing with a keyboard, it's slightly manipulating the angle of the wall jump. So essentially what the wall jump does is, so it gets your move right. So the right direction, and it gets your move up. And it gets the impact normal of the object that you're hitting. It's adding that on top. So essentially it's gonna fire you in the direction of your stick. It's gonna fire you a little bit in the direction of the impact normal. That sort of disables the fact that you cannot do wall crawl because of that. Let me show you what happens if you actually remove that. Might actually be fun to show. I'm gonna need to make a wall here. Right, so now if I just regularly do this, you see it's not possible for me to wall crawl. So, right, so you can see I cannot just bounce up the wall to get higher. If I were to remove this, I think this will do it. It might be some other stuff that also did get rid of it. Let's see what this will do. Right. And then you can wall crawl, which I didn't want to do. So I'm adding a little bit of impact normal. It's essentially just the normal of this object. So it's always pushing you slightly away from whatever you're wall jumping on. So I'm doing that to avoid sort of the wall crawling. And essentially over here, if you're using a keyboard, it's somewhat similar here, but it's slightly different. So you can see you get your move right, because on the keyboard, it's always going to be 1 if you're going to sort of hold it. So I'm doing it a little bit less extreme. I think over here, I'm doing a little bit more with the impact normal of the wall to sort of push you a little bit more in the direction of the impact normal. So I'm slightly changing it there because the wall jump doesn't feel that great if you don't do these sort of additional things. So essentially just checking if you're playing with a keyboard, make it work a little bit better. But again, probably don't play with a keyboard because it's not going to be great. But you can because of this. Let me make a note here. Keyboard, wall jump, controls. Beautiful. Let me make it, maybe it should be a function. Maybe function might make sense. Let's collapse this to a function, right? So that's how you sort of do it. So let's call it key. Oh no, doesn't have an output. All right, you know what? I'll do that later. Anyway, right. So that's that. So you see we've mostly only talked about just the general controls. You can see why I'm trying to split this up into multiple videos because there's just too much stuff going on. But yeah, that's I think for the most part the player controls. There's other elements, of course, in here, like the camera, spring arm, stuff like that. But we'll get into that. So I think I'm gonna call this a day for this video for right now. Next video, we're gonna be going into a lot of the other cool stuff, because we're gonna go into all of the level building tools, which is all of the other stuff you see here, which is, like I mentioned, you have all of this like these blocks you can change, and there's more cool stuff where that came from. Was this stuff isn't just doesn't just work with these boxes. You can replace the mesh here. So for example, here I have a worn wooden beam, a Megascans asset, so I can actually go, oh no, I don't, right, actually then they copied so let's copy the actor instead. So I can actually go in here, stacking mesh, I can actually drag in an object. So now I've put a Megascans thing in here, then I can go in there and I can assign the material. Oh wait, I need to assign it over here, right? So you can see now I actually have the Megascans wooden beam as an asset, which, so you can just roll on that, works. And I can tint it. As you can see, it still works with all of the other stuff. So that's why I say like all of the sort of graphic stuff can happen later. There's another thing I want to show you that we're working on, and then we'll call it a day, which is maps, levels, wall to wall. Right, let's just remove it. So I have a Houdini engine thing here. Let's initialize Houdini engine. I can just kind of show you what's going on here. I'm still working on that because I'm sort of trying to make something for the sort of the graphic tools. I need to re-enable my environment real quick. So I have a Houdini engine thing here. You see I have objects here loaded into it. Let's press cook. So it's gonna cook. It's gonna take a little bit. It's quite slow right now, but let's try baking it as an actor. See what that's gonna do. All right, refining Houdini proxy meshes. Let's see if this actually works. All right, and that always errors for some reason. All right, there we go. All right, now it worked. All right, so it baked out something. Now let's hide my geometry meshes over here. You can see now we have another piece of geometry here, which looks somewhat similar. This is actually one piece of geometry now. You can see I actually have these colors in this object. And I can actually override this with, let me grab a surface, for example. So I can go in here and I can actually assign another material. And you can see it will keep the colors. So this is real simple right now, but essentially it just takes sort of the input pieces that I gave it. It sort of remeshes it, extracts the colors from it, and then it reapplies them to the new mesh. Right now, of course, this is not gonna be, and then I can actually just go and I can play this. So you can see now it's actually playable with, yeah. It's a difficult level, so don't. I'm gonna mess this up. But you can see how that actually how that works, and of course that's just a starting point. This meshing it to a new mesh and then assigning the colors is just as a test. What I'm gonna be doing with this is I want to be able to use my default building blocks that I have. Just hide this again. So I want to use, let's hide this thing as well. So I want to be able to use these blocks to be able to design the levels. So I'm just going to be building all of the levels with these blocks, because this is just easy prototyping. Like, they are quite basic shapes. Like I mentioned, I can put all our geometry in here to do different shapes and stuff like that. It's all pretty flexible. But it's just easy prototyping. And then from there, I want to start building these tools that I'm doing right now in order to generate sort of the level assets. For example, I can take the stuff that I showed you before, and I'll in the future video, I'm going to show how that all works and what we're going to do for Hammer. But I can start building tools that will automatically sort of sample. You can imagine this might be a level with like floating space rocks or something like that. Or in another level, it might be wooden panels and then you have the environment and stuff like that, where it would sort of automatically create the level geometry for you based on sort of certain input blocks that would scatter maybe stuff in the environment, stuff like that. So then I can use all of the prototype assets that I've built here in order to start generating actual nice levels. Anyway, I'll leave it because this is already long enough. Hopefully you'll join me in the next video where I'm going to be talking about sort of these tools that I've been making in order to be able to generate these levels. Like I mentioned, so the doors, the triggers, the moving stuff, like all of the building blocks. So hopefully you'll join me in the next video where we're going to be doing that. So leave this thumbs up if you like this. Leave this thumbs down if you didn't like it. Subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. Again, this is going to be an ongoing thing while I work on this game. And again, this is probably going to be until end of next year or something. It's still going to be a lot of work. But hopefully I've given you sort of a good idea of like what I'm doing here. And yeah, hopefully this was interesting from... I don't know what's your perspective if you're a game dev, if you're a more Houdini or just wanting to get into Unreal. I don't know. I'm gonna do a lot of more videos, so hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Peace.